Welcome to Smashing Through Walls with Carla McGee. Whether you are just pulling up a seat to the table, breaking a glass ceiling, or smashing through walls, grab your favorite mug and join us on the first and third Friday at 11 o'clock for candid conversations with industry experts and decision makers as we navigate and explore all the things related to real estate and community.
Hey there, Wall Smashers. Happy Friday. This is Carla McGee, where we don't just break the glass ceiling, we are smashing down the walls. And I'm super excited today because we have fellow Phoenix Business RadioX podcasters, Mac and Bleu. And I'll let them introduce themselves and explain where that comes from and go ahead and get started. So happy Friday, guys.
Thank you. I am Robert Johnson. I am Mac of the Mac and Bleu, and he is J.J. Levenske.
Yeah, that's me.
Of the Blue.
Of the Blue. From Blue Wave.
Yes, that's it.
We weren't that smart to put it together on our own.
Yes.
We need a little phonetic help from our backgrounds.
Correct.
So tell me what Mac and Bleu stands for. Tell me what Blue Wave means and tell everybody.
I'll start with this one. Mac was a previous, when we did the launch, Mac Prefab was the sponsor. And so Mac Prefab was the company that I was with previously. Blue Wave is the company that JJ owns, general contractor. Mac Prefab was a Division 9 subcontractor. I have since changed and gone to Tory Contracting. Same thing, but we kept Mac. We'd already started the branding, and I can make it moving America's construction.
I love
if
it.
we want to.
Sure.
Something like that. So, yeah.
I love that you guys are like building Arizona.
Correct.
Right. Which is why I was so excited to have you on. I feel like our businesses like cross over in so many ways, right? Between selling commercial real estate or building it.
Sure.
Like everything always comes back to real estate,
Right.
is why I say, right? Back to where we put the building in the ground.
Yeah, and that's how we started too. We wanted to, well, actually, we were here. I don't know, Daryl, what was it? I think both of us were here probably about 6 months ago as guests on other podcasts, and afterwards, because we both had faces for radio, they asked us to come back. And
wait, what are you saying? They asked me to come back too. I really thought I was prettier than that. I'm just saying.
I'm not, crickets. No, not that. Yeah, boy, that you just stepped in.
That's okay. We have an episode called "A Face for Radio."
We're men.
Okay.
We're men, so we can get away with it.
Men are pigs.
So then we sat down with Karen and Daryl and did kind of just a brainstorming idea. And we always tell, and you've heard this before, that literally after I think it was only half hour, Karen was like, "Stop! We have enough content for multiple years
Correct.
in building Arizona." So we approached it looking at it from not just the industries that we're in as true builders or contractors. We extended it to a lot of where you look at the crossover of commercial real estate, economic development directors, the capital stacks, the architects, the engineers, the educational type stuff. I know that when we do our podcast, our next one is going to actually be focused on that, which I'm, so those kind of things is we're looking at the broader spectrum of building Arizona and everyone that comes into that. So that became our platform. We started every 2 weeks, and then in effective July, we're going to every week just because the demand was there.
There's just so much to talk about. It's so fascinating.
Sure. Yeah.
Tell me more about the educational one you're doing.
We're trying to expose a lot of the different entities or community-based things that would have education-related things that relate to anything building Arizona. So, for instance, our next one is the Junior Achievement, which, without getting into the minutiae and details, it's a great organization locally that, they take young children or middle school, high school people and put them in a real world application in their studio that's not far from here in Tempe as well. It's really cool. Like they have a town there with a bank and a bunch of businesses, and they take these students through it. So we are very fortunate that we have someone on that board. In addition, we have a local businessman who went through it as a local youngster. He's very successful now. But as a testimonial, when he's on our podcast, it'll just be really cool to have them bridge that. And then on top of it, to answer your question more globally, we're looking at the EVITs of the world, the trade schools, even the universities, and we're just getting started. So we're trying to make sure that we don't get too focused each month. Much like you want a diversity in your podcast to keep your listeners and advocates engaged, and that's what we're doing too. So education just happens to be one of them.
Oh, I asked because we had the director of economics for the city of Scottsdale, Rob Millar, on last week. And what came up as part of it when we were talking about like school, I mean, all of Scottsdale, but we were talking about school for some reason, you know, you kind of get on these tangents. And he was like, in the state of Arizona, you can build housing on public school property. And I was like, my mind was blown. And we kind of had a conversation around like, what would that look like if we had like teacher housing? Like how could we attract like such high quality teachers from other areas of the country if we had almost a student housing type situation, but for teachers? And so I found that fascinating because I'd never heard of anything like that. Have you guys?
No, I had not.
Not directly.
Yeah.
You know, full disclosure, I play as a general contractor. I play in the charter school space, so I get to see and am privy to a lot of things behind the scenes that I don't think the general public understands, like how that works between a private and public sector. Without getting geopolitical here, Arizona is one of the strongest charter school-based states in the nation because of what happened in the past. You know, supply and demand created a new vertical per se, and the people here just took it and ran with it. So to answer your question, kind of directly but indirectly, I have seen a little bit of that mindset and the growth potential there, but not specific to the teacher housing, but a lot of other creative things in that regard.
Right. Well, it sounds like maybe public school, public non-charter will also begin to catch up, or, you know, at
Correct.
least start having these conversations, because for those that don't know, Arizona is an open enrollment state and you don't have to live within your district. You can kind of go, as long as there's room in that school, you can go wherever you want. So because of that, our schools, I feel like, get kind of competitive with each other, whereas maybe in other states they get a little complacent about like, well, that's our demographic and that's who comes here. And here it's like, well, how can we attract the best talent? So I feel like that's where some of the conversations come, not just from schools, but from teachers.
Absolutely. And I think you're seeing a built-in meritocracy as a result. You know, everyone's in competition with one another, the way it should be, an even playing field, because you want the value prop should be the end user should get a better service and product, right? And back to what you were saying. So I think the best thing we can do is just stand back, watch, and be advocates in our respective roles. You know, what you represent in your industry, what we represent in our industries. And collectively, I think the movement will have a better outcome for the state of Arizona.
Like in general, I agree with
that's
you,
what I mean.
right? Yeah, because we'll be producing more educated, more well-rounded children turning into adults that stay in our state that can then work at all these fantastic companies we're bringing in, and just, you know, like Rob Millar said, is when the tide raises, all ships rise, or something like that.
You're you know, before, I don't want to hijack your whole podcast here to go down this thing, but I think you're seeing it from when you look at the uber growth of the high tech companies and what's spinning off from our like TSMC and Intel and all that, all the ancillary stuff that's coming from there. If you look at those corporations and peel back the onion and look at their C-suites, how they're engaged with the local universities, tech schools. I mean, don't kid yourself. Anyone that's listening, behind the scenes, ASU, U of A, GCU, NAU, they're in bed with all these people because they're the ones driving the ship right now. They're the ones saying, listen, we need 1,000 of your students to do X, Y, and Z. Help us build the program so that they're better ready.
Right. And it's not just unique to those businesses. That happens. That cross-collaboration happens in all kinds of companies. We have Boeing here.
Sure.
I mean, we have major corporations that have...
But the infusion that you've seen over the last year and a half specifically, I think, is where I was going with this, Carla, is, you have, and I didn't mean to single out those companies.
Yeah.
But the cumulative effect is very profound now. You're seeing it before. Those who were maybe just behind the scene conversations, now it's out in the public light. And I think that's the difference.
I agree. And then, so Taiwanese semiconductor plant. It's funny you mentioned that. So we drove up to Sedona this weekend and we drove by it. And the amount of cranes on that building blew my mind. Now, my husband is in commercial and industrial HVAC. You know, if you ever need a future guest, just saying. Yeah. But
book him, Dano.
Yeah. But he was telling me about some of the supply chain challenges and stuff that's going on with that facility. What is y'all's input about that as well? Like, what do you see from your standpoint?
Y'all's?
Y'all's.
Yeah. I actually understood what that meant.
That's your vocabulary.
Is that your lingo?
I can translate if you'd like.
Yeah.
What's interesting about what's happening out there that I hear from other people, other trades, I've had no direct interaction with them at all, but the workforce is being hijacked. Wrong word, but they're really going after tradespeople right now because they cannot get enough tradespeople.
Like headhunted, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's huge. And they are throwing money at people. So, I've heard things like, give it a year and a half, and Phoenix is going to be hurting for tradespeople. We're already hurting for tradespeople. It's not going to get much worse. Oh, well, I mean, it is going to get worse as time goes on, but technology is going to make that better by the way we build differently and the things that we do differently to compensate for that, which makes what we're all doing even more important in pushing to the next level and what construction is going to look like later. Yeah, it's huge. They're especially the semiconductor plant out in the Northwest. They're just it's the same. Intel, and you look at both of them, and it's just a crane village. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Well,
and
then
that's
you
just going to keep happening.
You take all the distribution that's happening on both the west side and east side around. On the east side, you have the gateway, call it the gateway zone. That
Well, it's their tech corridor.
Right, the tech corridor. You have your tech corridor in Chandler, per se. Then you have the west side, what's happening on the 303 loop. And then don't forget about what's happening in Maricopa and Casa Grande to the south of us. The major industrial players there in the batteries and all of that, those businesses. And, this is no secret. The intermodal that's going to come down there is profound because you're connecting the Latin Americas with the United States. That Casa Grande will be the new eco hub of the next, next 20, 30 years because of the availability of how everything mixes there.
Well, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bigger Pockets, but Bigger Pockets ranked Casa Grande the number one place to invest in the whole United States like 2 years ago. And it was for a lot of those reasons. And anytime I have an investor call me that's like, I want to put my money in Arizona, where should I put it? That's one of my first recommendations because it's still so affordable. But like, if you want a long-term play, that's definitely where you should be looking at because the growth it's all in the pipeline. It's just coming down.
Well, and, full disclosure, our first guest was Nathan Steele, who was the economic development director down in Maricopa. And we talked extensively about that, about how they live. They can be in this symbiosis, if you will, where Casa Grande, I don't mean to pigeonhole this or stereotype it, but in essence, they're attracting all the corporate industrial space. And then, all these workers and people and community-based is kind of Maricopa. Now, that's not exclusive, and I don't mean to over-stereotype, but that's kind of how the ebb and flow is going down there, and it works. When you look at it, both communities are thriving as a result. And the tax base, I think, actually ends up benefiting too because you're concentrating X over here and you're concentrating Y over here, so we're not expanding roads and schools to areas that aren't needed. And so I think you're seeing how, back to your original question how is the hypersensitive economy of Arizona reacting to the construction space? And that's why we've felt so strongly about advocating our podcast, the Building Arizona under Mac Bleu, was to address those kind of things. And now to see that it crosses over into your podcast as well, I think it's great. I mean, the more exposure we have it and advocacy that we can get, I just think we're going to be better off.
Right. Again, with those like the rising tide and we all succeed, right?
So,
and it's super fascinating too, because talking about like some of like using Maricopa as like an example for like residential housing, we had the city of Apache Junction come on and they just had like 274 square miles annexed and 4 square miles of that is already like slated and being developed for, I think they said 11,000 houses. I remember 1,100 or 11,000, but it's like they're working on bringing in a lot of houses. And then they came to us because what do you need when you need houses? You need restaurants and you need places for them to work in the commercial space, right? So have you guys heard anything about the city of Apache Junction and like their huge expansion that they're doing in terms of affordable housing?
He's the east side guy.
Yeah. The answer is yes. And you're seeing some early shakers and movers that are basically being the catalyst to that, both on capital development side and then working on the municipal side as well. I think the other thing you have going on in AJ is, if you can't, in a non-negative connotation, I think you have some gentrification going on. You're seeing neighborhoods that typically had blight that are getting cleaned up. Again, raising the residual value of those areas. And that's, some people say that's a bad thing. Some people say it's a good thing. I'm not here to be judge or jury, but in the industries that we're in, it seems like it's for the betterment of the society. in those areas, because it's funny, on our last podcast, we had a gentleman by the name of Chuck Marone, who is the co-founder of Strong Towns, and a very interesting guy that basically his whole life thesis, if you will, is about how to effectuate that tax base to its highest degree of utility back to the consumers, i.e. the residents and constituents. He didn't directly say, but he cautioned all of us here in the Phoenix Valley is, growth for growth's sake can be dangerous. Growth for the right sake can be very advantageous to the long term and long run that we have here in the Valley. And so I think you take kind of the knowledge and the spirit and the message that Chuck brought, and you take a look at like what AJ's doing. They have a perfect opportunity to do it right, or they have an opportunity to do it poorly.
Right.
And let's see. And
Right.
Again, the more that we talk about it on these podcasts or things like this, the more that people will get the knowledge and the data that they have to then go make the smart decisions.
Right.
We're not here to solve it. We're here to kind of give the platform and those topics that can hopefully effectuate positive change.
I totally agree. And when they came to talk to us, they were like, we are well aware that we're known for trailer parks and storage units, and we do not want we don't want that kind of, negative connotation around us anymore. We want to be more than that. We are a beautiful city that just kind of gets a bad rap. And I couldn't agree more. It's gorgeous.
The views
out there.
Yeah. You don't get any better views of the mountains.
Yeah, you can't, right? Like, it's stunning out there. So if JJ's the East Valley guy, then what does Torrey Contracting do?
Torrey Contracting is a Division 9 subcontractor.
Which explain to the audience what that means.
That's coming next.
Okay.
And I don't know if you guys have picked up this whole thing here. JJ is the brains of the outfit. He works all week long on using big words.
Does it toilet paper of the day?
Yeah, it's big words.
You're just assuming I have toilet paper.
And I'm the big yellow one's the sun guy.
That's not true, by the way.
Torrey Contracting, we are a manufacturer and fabricator of cold form steel, load bearing and non-load bearing structures. To drill into that is every one of us has seen metal studs, whether we've realized that or what we were looking at or not. But most every commercial building, this commercial building, are all built with, instead of lumber, they're built with wood.
No, you said that wrong.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I did say that wrong. Are built with steel instead of wood.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Nice job.
Well, I got to.
See, that's
he keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier.
Yeah, okay.
At drywall, so metal stud framing, drywall, ephes, the stucco on the outsides of the building. And we're trying to turn, our attempt is to turn the industry into prefabrication, offsite construction. So we're designing and framing a building offsite in a warehouse environment where we can, the quality control issues are much better. So we frame everything while the dirt work's going on, while the slabs are getting poured, we're building the building. And when they tell us the slab is ready on a 3-4 story building, we show up and start standing the walls up.
What kind of time do you cut off the build with a process like that?
Huge.
Yeah.
Which again leads into so many other things. So we can cut, on a 4 or 5 story building, 100,000 square feet plus, we can shave 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks off of a schedule, potentially more. The problem right now that we are working to change the solution or find a solution for is the other subcontractor, the other trades. Because if we go that fast, the only way that the others can keep up with us is to put more people on a job, which is going to raise their money, raise their dollars, raise their contract amounts. So we are trying to lead the charge. It's happening everywhere, but we're trying to really incorporate prefabricated electrical systems, electrical assemblies, plumbing, things like that. So when we stand the wall up, those components are in the wall when we stand them up. Then it's a huge win. Then we're really, the ROI is amazing. People are renting buildings faster, filling them up faster, loaned, the whole thing. You take it. So offsite construction is the next wave.
So two things. A, that sounds like probably music to my husband's ears because he has to wait for all that stuff before they can start dropping the boxes on the top of the building. But if I'm a young person and I'm hearing this and I'm hearing like that sounds like the future and I'm trying to think what I want to be when I grow up, what does that look like? What should they be studying or getting into or like, something?
They're already doing it. They're gaming.
They're really.
No, really. So the design and stuff, the designs are done in primarily what we need to, and this is a great segue. What needs to happen is the design needs to move to a Revit model, and Revit is just a software that's a 3D modeling software. Everything's been in AutoCAD for years now.
Too long.
Yeah, it has been too long. And so now if architects, engineers will begin the move to Revit, to 3D modeling, the problems that solves are amazing. So what happens when we design a building is we'll get a floor plan from an architect. If it was done in Revit, fantastic. If not, we're going to provide a model of our framing system, of the structure in Revit, and then that gets distributed to the mechanical, electrical, plumbing contractors, and they can do all of their clash detection. They can put in, where their plumbing risers are, where the units go, where the ductwork's going to go, everything. This is all done while they're doing dirt work.
Wow.
And so when you hit the ground, you're hitting the ground running, and everybody is on the same. And you've already solved a lot of the issues that typically come about during a project. You look like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to I was just thinking of the audience and the listener, viewers / how do they visualize what comes next? And so, Carla, from my perspective, I think we would be doing an injustice if we didn't say that literally in all the trades and in all the GCs and architects, engineers, everyone knows about this. This isn't a secret.
Right.
A certain percentage are doing it and doing it very well. The problem is the majority still is not. So instead of complaining about it, what we're trying to do, I think a lot on our podcast is show the exposure to those things in all those different areas so that there can be a culmination and then it can grow exponentially.
Right.
And so like even Robert's background, we actually have a very good relationship with a lot of his competitors that you would normally call competitors. But here's the reality. We need all of them to succeed too, just like I need my GC competitors to succeed. Because if we're collectively raising the bar, then it'll always be better. And the other thing, as a this may sound a little bit derogatory, but as a guy that's only been here just a little under 10 years, when I came from another part of the country, there's no question Arizona was behind the times in construction technology.
I believe that.
And implementation. We were still the laissez-faire, hasta mañana philosophy.
Yeah.
And that is no longer. If we're going to bring all of what Arizona is bringing to the marketplace with the manufacturing, with all those things that we think are driving our local economy and really our regional and national economy here based in Arizona, then we also have to game up.
Right.
And so the capitalism and the innovation will prevail, but that's what I think, it's important that the audience understands that what Robert's talking about is this isn't like an inward fighting thing that's happening. It's an outward expansion thing.
Yeah.
Correct. And back to your question is what do these people, the listeners, what do they need to do? What do their children need to do?
What do I tell my daughter to study at school?
Well, again, it's anything technology. I mean, everything's technology driven. It's all done, they're having to write code, they're having to design, they're, all kinds of things. What it makes different is because you know this, young people growing up now when I grew up, going into construction was what everybody wanted to do because you made good money instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been the thing, the theme for many years. Now, even my son, and I've told this on our show, excellent with his hands, 15 years old, great. He'd worked for me for 2 or 3 every summer. He'd done things. And he catches me one day and says, "Dad, no offense, but I don't want to do this the rest of my life." And I was a ditch digger at the time, had an underground utility business. And I get it. I didn't want to do that the rest of my life either. And so he got into doing project management and doing, other things and is doing well, very well. But that's what's happened. People have moved away from the trades into technology and
and the housing crash didn't help them moving away from the trades at all, right? They watched their parents or even themselves get laid off, cut overnight,
Sure.
lose their house, and they're like, why in the world would I want to do that?
Yep.
So when my husband and I were young and we were putting ourselves through college,
Mm-hmm.
he was not a school fan.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the school year in June we lived in Washington State. That's where we're from. And he would go work construction because in Washington, that's when all the construction happens. And they'll take anybody that knows how to swing a hammer. So he could leave June 1st, go swing a hammer, do whatever, do roofing, do carpentry work, and go make really good money.
Exactly.
And he would come home every day tired, but he'd be like, man, I don't know if I need to go back to college because I'm doing really great. But by the end of the summer, come September, he'd be like, did you sign me up for my classes yet? I don't think if I can't do this for the summer at 25 years old, I'm sure as heck not going to be able to do it at 55 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's super interesting. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that anymore. They don't, work construction over the summer or, just go temporary like your son or, and
yeah,
so,
you don't see as much of the as much of the seasonal.
You don't.
I mean, I was from the upper Midwest and it was same thing. We had 9 months of winter, so
yeah.
You figure out how to work, but it was very normal for, especially I'll give my good friends that were in concrete masonry, steel, they would get laid, the road work guys, they would all get laid off in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm,
So they became experts at ice fishing and doing, like you said, side hustles.
Yeah.
They would plow driveways for all their but
exactly.
You're down here or in Arizona, you don't see as much cyclicality and cycling like that.
Right.
But back to Robert's point is technology is now that gap provider, if you will. So I'll think of your son. If the difference is if you can just be marginally useful with your hands, but you've got a great mind and you want to game and you want to use virtual reality and all those kind of things, you can now be the person involved in the modeling of all that. Back what Robert was talking about with the Revit and the BIM and the IPD and all those things that have been around for a long time. It's just we need more people on the integration side.
So is that what they're teaching them now? And say it wouldn't be manufacturing engineering. What would they be? Which program would they be teaching that kind
all
of
them.
stuff?
They're all blending into one. I mean, when you take industrial tech, construction management, manufacturing engineering, I mean, you're even getting crossover in your what we call your double E and ME, which is your mechanical engineering and electrical engineering.
Yeah,
that's all critical. So it's really the blending of all of those disciplines.
Yeah, because what we do with our system, we have roll forming machines that our designers, we have to have designers on staff, and those designers will design the wall panel. That program gets fed into our CNC machine. That's basically what it is. That roll form steel that we buy in coils and spits it out in pieces, and those pieces are put together to make those walls. So every piece of what we've talked about all goes into getting that done and loaded on a truck, on a trailer, and then the people that like working with their hands are standing those up in the field and putting everything together.
Kind of your more traditional, what we're thinking of type, so what we consider the summer folks, the ones swinging the hammers, then they do that.
Mm-hmm. Instead of the seasonal transition, what we do see sometimes is more of your, this to me is not a very touchy subject, but for some it might be, is your immigration pattern stuff. So when you look at certain trades, you have very ethnic background minded concentrations. Like for instance, when I first got to the Valley here, just under 10 years ago, I remember that a lot of the flooring and what I consider tile, even the granite specialties, were very Yugoslavian based. The ex, the whatever, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, all the immigrants that came from there, they had a strong background in that. And I was like, wow, look at this. Here's a whole ethnicity just around that trade. And you see that in a lot of things. I guess where I'm going with this is that one of the biggest barriers we have is still language in our industry.
I agree.
And so it's not about the workmanship. It's not about the hardworking of any background. Okay, let's be honest. I don't care the race, creed, color, all that is indifferent. It's if you're a good human being, you're a good human being. If you're a bad human being, you're a bad human being. Okay, same thing applies on a construction site. But the language barrier is still a big deal. And it's not just English, Spanish either. It's much deeper than that.
It's so much deeper.
And so, again, with all the apps that we have.
This is his phone.
Yeah, with the apps that we have on all the smart project management systems that all of us are using, whether it's a GC, subcontractor, vendor, supplier, all those kind of things, if we can continue to develop those technologies, that language barrier to me is actually a bigger issue that we see.
So I would think the opposite. I would think as we streamline this with technology via our phones or whatever programs, that program should be able to translate those orders, those whatever, into any language that
it is,
anyone
but
would speak.
Carla, the usage is still the issue.
Got it.
Yeah, I would say it's more the naivety of guys like me that are at the head of the companies,
That's
not realizing that your company needs tools, your people need tools to bridge that.
And how do we even train people to use these tools if we aren't speaking the same language to tell them that they need to use the tool?
Correct. And what's real interesting is that, and I would think that typically the old guy,
which you are not.
I was like, is that your boss?
Yeah, the old guy. No, everybody knows. Yeah, I'm the old guy. So
I like
it's not
seasoned
supposed
better.
Seasoned?
I like mature. You're actually mature.
Okay, I'll go with that. The mature guy.
Okay.
Although Daryl's pretty mature, and he's not the old guy.
I think I
forget
don't think he's the youngest
it.
person
Yeah,
in this room.
He's probably not mature either. So
I've met Daryl.
Yeah, we're not typically the tech-minded person that at least is sharing and doing things. And I was sitting in an office listening to a conversation go on in another room about this topic, where they were having trouble with several Hispanic trade people, foremen, and they were excellent craftsmen, but they couldn't, and they could look at the plans and they could see the plans and they could tell those things, but they couldn't read the notes, the specifications, all of the little things that you have to know. And I'm like, I walked around the corner and said, guys, have you ever downloaded blah, blah, blah? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, if you can take that and hold your phone over the top of it like this and hover over the drawings, and it'll change it into Spanish on the phone for you while you're looking at it. Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Brilliant.
The Hispanic folks were like, oh my God. It's like the
mind blown. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all out there.
It bridged a gap.
But that's been there for years.
What's interesting is kind of going back to what you were saying, right? Like, so I'm going to assume that the three of us are all Generation X, which means that we are smart enough and tech savvy enough to, if you explain it to us, we get it, but we're not quite at the point as the generation below us to create it, to, code it and all the other things. So it's like, how do we almost bridge that gap between the two, even generationally, so that they're thinking of it, but they're not thinking of it if they never worked in the trades and they know how to make it. But we're like, man, if we just had this tool, then we could all work together and almost bridging that generational gap also. So it's like you have a language barrier, you have a generational gap, you have all kinds of different variables going on.
That's why we have to be advocates. We really have to, and that's thus what we're all doing, sitting around this table and what we do on our own. But that's the win, is you have to become comfortable enough in what you're doing that you quit running your job or running your company, which I'm saying that tongue in cheek, and really start sharing the news and educating and going more into being an advocate. Because I think as it changes, as the way we construct changes, we need all. We need the old guy. We need the new. We need all of those pieces and parts in the middle to make that happen.
And we need to embrace it.
And that the ones that don't.
Wasn't before. It was I'm on the top, you're down here, you're my intern,
and
whatever.
And we still see that.
Yeah,
I mean, we hugely, I hear it every day. I've built multifamily buildings with wood framing for years. It's always worked. I've always made money at it. Okay, great. You don't want to make more?
Right.
Oh, okay. What happens when you can't get the wood, or when we go through these supply chain issues like we're going through now? Those that fail to embrace it or to be progressive with their thinking are quite honestly going to be left behind.
I agree. And on my side of things, what I find the most frustrating when I always see problems is, and it's the person that tells me, I've been doing this 27 years. And I'm like, that already tells me we're going to have a problem. It means that 9 times out of 10, it means we're not going to collaborate on the sale. We're not going to try and figure out how to best serve our client. It means you only want to do it one way and only get it done in this box.
People hate change.
Oh, yeah.
People kick against change incredibly. Change is just nothing more than growth. I mean, that's all it is. And if you're not growing, you're dying. So you have to learn to love
Well, and you mentioned
growth.
multifamily, which makes, my ears perk up
Mhm.
because that's in our team, in our brokerage, that's where my specialty is multifamily properties. I think that's brilliant, doing the prefab offsite and why not? Why aren't we doing that so that we can bring more high density housing in? Like that makes so
Yeah,
much
and you can
sense to
do
me.
that in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Affordable housing, the little single family rentals, the build to rent, subdivisions
Their
that are
model, yeah.
showing up everywhere.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's 5 or 6 different models that are just you're building 100 of each on a site.
But those are all commercial platforms. Do we think we'll start to see this translate into residential, into single family homes as well?
Yeah, it has already.
It already
Has it?
has. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The same thing happens in those subdivisions, and again, it just has to be embraced here in the state of Arizona. I don't know how it is in others, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's per municipality, but because you're building with steel, it's non-combustible. So when you see a subdivision that's being a new subdivision, for weeks, for months, they're doing dirt work. They're pushing dirt. They're putting in curb and gutter. They're doing all these things. Fire lines. The reason they have to do that before they start building is you're building with wood. You're building with something that's going to,
Could burn
combustible.
down. Yeah.
So if you're building with steel, not only is your builder's risk insurance substantially less, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars less, you can start building. You can go out and just start scraping pads on the ground and start building right away because nothing's going to burn. Furthermore, you don't need a dumpster because we're doing all the work off site. So we're showing up. We're not cutting stuff. We're not throwing stuff away. We're just standing stuff up. So it's so much faster. I have talked with several single family rental developers and builders.
Mm-hmm.
They all see it. They all love it. It's all fantastic. We got to do this, but we've been doing it. This way we've done it.
Back to change.
How are we
Right.
How are we gonna nail the doors? How's the trim? How's the cabinets going to go in? How's just all this stuff, and they just vapor lock. It's education. Educate. There are some in the valley that have built out of steel. I haven't built any in the valley out of steel, but I just last week spoke with one of the largest multifamily developers in Nevada, in Southern California. They just had one of their projects burned down while it was being built. Why do you think they were talking to me?
Right.
It was like, oh man, that's horrible. We don't want to do that again.
Well, and thank God it was being built, not already built.
Exactly. Let's talk about that one. That's even a better one. When it's built and it's built out of steel, there's furniture still going to burn, carpet's still going to burn, but it slows the burn down and it's going to allow more people to get out of a building and survive. So it's a huge win all the way around.
That makes me think of, and gosh, I cannot remember how long ago this was. I feel like it was a few years ago, but I'm probably wrong. Mandalay Bay in Vegas had a fire, and I remember watching it. I mean, and you guys know anybody knows how tall those hotels are. And this fire, I remember seeing it so high up, and I was like, how are people going to come down from there? How scary is that?
Yeah.
And yes, it would still burn, but think of
Sure.
how much mitigation you could do if this was, I mean, obviously a hotel is probably all steel, but
the structural components.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of that way people, because not everybody knows what we mean when we say multifamily and stuff, they can kind of put like a visual to it, right? And so if you're in a 3rd floor apartment and the apartment catches on fire, most of those are stick built. Yeah.
So senior family living, assisted living,
Yeah.
they all have
Scary.
to be built out of steel.
Yeah.
It's code. You have to build them out of steel. And I'm thinking to myself, well, duh. And why are you making them do them out of steel? For all those same reasons, the combustibles. Why that doesn't equate and go over. It's starting to in LA County now. Over certain square footage has to be done out of steel. That's going to begin to really expand.
So then do we still have inventory shortages and supply chain shortages with steel as well?
There really never has been a shortage. They put it on allocation, which means that if I want to buy steel today for your project, I buy it at whatever today's price is, but I'm not going to get that for 90 days.
Right. And isn't steel, it's like in its rawest form from the ground, right? So that's a finite resource, correct?
Sure.
So then what happens if we run out?
Well, we build the cold form steel that we use is 75% recycled steel.
Oh, that's cool. So then where does say that come from? Where does the recycling process come from?
Yeah, I don't know how it winds up getting to us, but I can tell you this, that to build a 2,200 square foot home takes about 1 acre of lumber, of trees.
Yeah.
You can build that same home in the steel that's in 6 cars.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
But those have to be old cars in order to be, right?
Probably.
Right, we're not talking
not like Daryl's carbon fiber.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
bike
exactly.
or.
But and you see, again, it gets back to that whole recycling and sustainability, the whole thing.
Right.
A lot of developers are doing the net zero stuff now, and all of these things play into it. So, yeah, it's very cool.
I think an important part, Carla, is that just kind of tailoring off of what Robert was talking about. In the past, the cyclicality of steel versus wood was all economic based.
Mm-hmm.
In the new paradigm, you're seeing that there's other factors that are being contributory towards that. And what I mean by that is you have your environmental side, you have because you guys are going down the recycling side, you have your compliance side, back to what he was talking about with the underwriting of insurance policies or things like that. I would say, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in the last few years, you've seen a much more impactful decision based on those different parameters than just economics.
Oh, absolutely.
So if that makes sense, because I'll give you an example. I drove by a house the other day that was under construction, and there was as much in the dumpster as there was on the house.
I believe it.
So, no fault to that person, that contractor, whatever. They're just doing it under a paradigm that's probably 20 years old. Okay, but in what Robert's talking about is we as a group of people, we as a group of industries, can we really afford to do that long term? Okay, hey, let's break that down. That owner's losing money. That general contractor's losing money. We as a society are losing because we're throwing away stuff that we took how long to grow and harvest and process, and we're literally throwing it back in a landfill. It's pretty dumb.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean by, if you can look at it in the cyclicality of what I just described, there's a bunch more wins, and that's again why we're doing the advocacy towards better, not necessarily, well, it's better all around.
Yeah, I
agree. And then because, say, in a facility where you guys are doing it off-site, right, there's not better planning, but better planning, right? It's lumber comes in pieces that are already pre-measured, and so when you're planning for that, you have to guess over so that you're bringing in the correct amount, and you guys can get likely so much more accurate with the materials you need, so that just thinking waste of lumber or that type of inventory wouldn't be there.
Our waste when we manufacture is where they punch the holes, and and the little piece that comes out when you punch it. If the wall is 8 feet 11 and 7/16, that's what it gets cut. That's what it gets made to. And so,
you're not taking a 12-foot stud and throwing 2 feet in the garbage.
Right.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
But the bigger thing here is let's go away from the materials and let's look at the human element here. We're in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go outside and especially the last few days. No offense, but I'm too old to do that anymore.
It's hot.
Okay, so next generation you're talking about, do they want to be out in that stuff for 12 hours a day? The answer is no. Do we want them out there as an employer having safety risks and depleting their body and all those kind of things? I mean, yeah, the old adage is, a little sweat equity never hurt anyone. I'm not up against that, but for the long-term sustainability, in Robert's situation, they can pull that in-house, in the shade, in a conditioned space, and people want to be there, versus being out 3 stories on a 110 day in Arizona. Right. It's a no-brainer.
Well, and then the tenure of your employee is going to happen also, right? Because if you get someone who comes in and they deal with this heat in, swinging a hammer or in construction, their tenure is going to be very short. Right. That is a short-lived career.
And their attention span is going to be even shorter.
Right.
But then you have the safety element, too, of just bringing more people home alive every day, and then back to insurance, the cost of all of that. So it's really a no-brainer. We're just trying to get it. There's a lot of good companies out there like Robert's and a bunch of people in other industries that are really trying to push the envelope here. And then for the listeners' sake, the next piece is all the integration. So the integration is what's going to happen on blockchain and everything else, so that it literally is vertical nuance that everyone can be related to. So, we could spend a whole couple hours on that alone, but that is in essence where our industry is and needs to go. When you take the combination of the offsite modular approach with what we can do on the blockchain to share all the information.
So then, other than our respective podcasts, how else can we get, how else can we educate consumer or, maybe not end user, but the people who are going to be constructing with these products or how do we change that frame of mind?
For years and years and years, we did plumbing with copper.
Right.
Everything was copper. And then came PEX, and PEX is the plastic line. And when it came out, I remember, there's lawsuits galore because it's foreign, made, and it failed, and all the problems with the houses, and you have to rip it all out. People hate change. And now PEX is everywhere. And we have to just continue educating, sharing the message, and really just doing it. The project, we built a project in Tucson, 5-story, 125,000 square foot multifamily building. And the general contractor had been a multifamily builder, built everything out of wood, and did not like it. The owner, we had to convert it from wood to steel because of what was going on with supply chain and pricing in wood. We built that project, and that owner and that general contractor have come back and said they will never build a multifamily building again any other way. It was too simple. It was too fast. It was too safe. Everything. Yeah, we just have to keep dragging everybody into the game, even if we have to drag them kicking and screaming.
Well, I think the other thing is show them that the people like us and the people that we surround ourselves with, that we're not afraid to fail forward, and then that will give them the encouragement to do as much. But back to your specific question, Carla, I think it's, giving those examples, giving those testimonials, giving those videos, all the things that we know how to do in social media through things like what we're doing with with your podcast, our podcast, and in the whole network of our podcasting. Because podcasting is so much more than just the audio piece anymore. It's video, it's streamed, it's this, it's that. I'm geeked out because I can't wait till we do it on AR and VR where, my avatar will be doing the podcast instead of, not that I don't love you, Robert, but, I'm just saying it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
So the more you geek and dream out about stuff, like my wife always says, dreaming's free. So just go for it.
Well, and I remember even in business school, we would talk about where do businesses fail? Anybody can plan and plan and plan, but until you actually execute and until you start showing people what you can do with those plans is where you fail forward, right? It's where you at some point you have to put it into motion so you can see where it's broken, and so you can see what we need to do better and what we need to do next. And it sounds like we've put that plan in place, and what we need to do next is just continue to educate the population about it.
That's it. Vision without action is just daydreaming. So, yeah, we just have to continue to just do it. And the more we do it, the better we get.
Well, I love it. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
Sure.
I appreciate it. I really
we
do.
We get to reciprocate it.
Yeah, too. It's fun. This was so fascinating. I kind of went into today with we've all met each other through our podcasts, and I just was like, we cross over on so many levels. I just wanted to chat. And so it was really nice because I feel like that's what we did. We just chatted.
We did. And we find that's really makes the best times for us in our podcast as well, is when you have a conversation like we've had today and you feel like we just sat down and started talking and now the time's gone. So yeah, it's always a win, but this is the fun part.
Cool part is I think we almost hatched her MO. Look at smashing through walls.
I love it.
We didn't know that you literally were going to talk about walls.
And smashing through them. Right? Wood ones to steel. Yeah, that's correct.
I love it. Yeah. What do you think we could just tell anybody who's trying to start a podcast with our last couple minutes left? What kind of...
Go for it.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, definitely have to do it. But find the right people.
Yeah.
I can say that I started trying before I met JJ. I started trying, got very close. It was going to be very expensive the way that I was doing it. And it was going to, it was just find the right people, find the right place to do it. And then it's a lot of fun.
Well, and a little plug for
For who?
For our good colleagues.
For Phoenix Business Radio?
Phoenix
Maybe,
Business
yeah, them.
Yeah,
you know,
might be a decent one to start
our
with.
love for Karen and Daryl. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I think the question is valid. Is anyone that wants to go into this, it's not hard. You just have to have the commitment. And Daryl and Karen and the people here at Phoenix at Business RadioX in Phoenix, they know how to do it.
I totally agree. I've literally told everybody about it, and anybody who comes on is super impressed with, what we have going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And same, for the last year, that was like one of my goals last year was to do a podcast, and I could just not find a platform that I was happy with, or was very expensive, or it was very labor intensive on my part, and
Correct.
I already have a full-time job,
Correct.
And 2 kids and a life. Like I needed something just like this. So I'm so glad we all found our home, and I appreciate you guys coming. How can people get a hold of you? How can they contact you?
Go to macandbleu.com, MACANDBLEU.com.
Yeah, we're both
JJ,
we're both connected on there, and
And do you guys have some kind of intake form for future guests?
we do.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
So if you think you would love to talk about the future of the construction industry, then go on their website and fill out the form. And if you don't fit there, maybe you'll come here.
Hey,
Absolutely.
check out both of ours.
That's
there you
right.
go.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having us on today. It was a pure joy.
You've been listening to Smashing Through Walls, a place for robust conversations about the building and blocks of Arizona commercial and real estate investments. Host Carla McGee is a commercial real estate broker with MHG Commercial, powered by My Home Group. The opinions expressed here are not necessarily the opinions of My Home Group and do not constitute any offer or advertisement of business or services. The real estate market is cyclical, and listeners assume all responsibility should any return on investment, tax consequences, credit effects, or financing terms not meet their expectations. Guests may not be qualified to provide financial, legal, or tax advice regarding a real estate transaction. Listeners are advised to obtain professional tax and legal advice and counsel.